What's the difference between a good joke and a bad joke timing? What's up, fam and cheese? Pleasure to be out here today for another Real Talks video. It's a beautiful spring day and it's a shame that not more people can come out and enjoy it due to the current pandemic. That being said, I feel like more people are out here than on a regular sunny day. Yes, we have a bit of a culture of disobedience, if you couldn't tell. Speaking of disobedience, actually speaking more of obedience, today we're talking about being followed, but not in a creepy stalker way, more in the way of follow me as I follow Christ. Ooh-wee, there's a lot of weight to that statement. A question I want to ask today is, are you inviting people to follow you? Or we could even start at more of a square one, are you someone worth being followed? Or better yet, a third one, are you following? I think this is especially a good message because we have a culture that is so not submissive to leadership, like so anti-establishment, and probably for good reason in some cases, don't get me wrong. It's good for this type of culture because on one hand, we have a group of people who don't want to invite people to follow them because they think that they're acting better than the other person. Or we have someone who doesn't want to follow a person because that is, well, that's practicing submission. And practicing submission is not the, it's not the most liked thing in America, I don't think. We're very anti-establishment here, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just something to be aware of. So let's hop right into the verse in question then. Very short verse, it comes from 1 Corinthians 11:1. Follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. Now usually when we first break into this verse, I've had a lot of guys go right into it and say, well, he doesn't mean follow Paul. What he's saying is follow Christ in Paul. With that being said, he's also pretty much saying, look at what I do and do it. So it's important to note that he starts from this place of I'm following Jesus, not Paul, so follow me as I follow Jesus. I think to get an even better and deeper understanding of what he's saying here, you have to look at what comes just before it in chapter 10. Paul in that section is talking about the freedom, the newfound freedom that we now have as believers. It's a really cool message because what he's saying is now we're free from the world just like in the beginning in the creation story. As we're manifested into that holiness, we start to approach the true intention. And with Christ's likeness comes this freedom from the world, not this anchor to it. Now, if you couldn't tell, that's a lot of power to give people. And that kind of thing scares people. And for good reason. We haven't exactly made the best use of that power and freedom in the past. In fact, I'd be willing to say it gets misused more often than not. Nonetheless, this freedom is freely given by the sacrifice of Jesus. And as we follow him in his ways and his likeness, we start to gain access to more and more and more of that freedom. Now, I'd have to bet that all of you, if not most of you, have heard the saying, with great power comes great responsibility. And that's exactly what Paul is saying. Essentially, the message is just because we can doesn't always mean we should. He draws back on what God cares most about, the intentions of your heart in every action. Do it all for the glory of God. What Paul is also acknowledging is that this kind of knowledge and understanding of what it means to follow Jesus doesn't just happen overnight. And that's by design. We're in relationship, a growing, changing relationship where we learn more and more as we go. And there is a beauty in that, but that also calls to the need of why this verse exists. He's essentially saying, you guys are new believers. You're still learning the ropes, so follow me as I follow Christ. And that can come off as kind of cocky, kind of naive, especially when he's speaking to people who have to be older than him in the place that he's speaking to. That's not always received the best. So I'll leave the question to you. Is it a cocky thing? Is it a sinful thing to acknowledge spiritual maturity? To acknowledge that one man's spiritual maturity may be at a different place along the road than another's? So let's backtrack then. Let's look at what Paul has said. We have this immense power, this immense freedom, and it could now be used in two ways. We could use it to justify ourselves to go off and do willy-nilly whatever we want. And we start to begin to preach our own gospel. We start to do a very dangerous thing. There's also a second option there in the middle that I almost forgot about, We could just acknowledge that it's a scary thing, that we don't want to do that first thing, and just sit on our laurels and not do anything at all. At that point, we're just living to be a shell of what we could be, which I think is really what's happening. We're either on this side or we're on this side. But really the beauty and the power of this message and this principle is that there's great power, there's great freedom. Now, let's walk it out together. Now this route is tough because it takes humility on both sides. It also takes effort, it takes community, it takes trying to look outside of yourself for things. But when we start to do that, when we start to take that extra effort, that extra initiative, not only do we learn from those around us, but we ourselves get to give back, and it is so much more blessed to give than to receive. Not only that, to give back out what you've learned, to put it back out there after you've learned it, is really the whole reason why you get it in the first place. So in that way, we're being more responsible. So let's dispel of this idea that Paul was somehow being cocky or naive by making this statement. And let's not pretend that this statement is just reserved for the apostles. Paul is clearly laying down a model, and it's a model that Jesus laid down too. He clearly empowered the people that were under him. Rather than being cocky or naive, it's being humble, responsible, and it's taking the initiative. So let's go back to the question, are you worth following? I gotta say, y'all, I gotta give a tough message. Not everyone is worth following. First thing I'd encourage is to make sure to cry out to God to be baptized with the Holy Spirit. Because at that point, you get a spirit that can discern who is worth and who is not worth following. You have a spirit that looks outside of yourself for that answer. And on the other hand, in leadership, when you have the Holy Spirit, you can start to approach it with more humility to make sure you're not falling into that trap that so many others are. Now, in contrast to the people that are constantly screaming, follow me, do as I say from power, now we're given a power and authority and a freedom, and from that, we speak out, follow Jesus. That's what's being said. And this isn't just for the apostles to do. This is a message for the entire church. If you need a next step, I would say start by reaching out to someone you recognize as more spiritually mature than you, and ask just to come alongside them. No ulterior motives. Take time out of your schedule, find you a time, and start to meet up and learn from them, submit. And number two, super easy, start doing what Jesus did. Let's get out, let's get on the streets. It's hard to do that at first. That's why it's important to have someone come with you. He sent them out in twos. Now, all that being said, let me leave you with a couple questions. One, who are the people that are popping into your mind as I start saying these things? Because for some of you more mature believers, you might start to think, oh, I could encourage so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so to start meeting up regularly. And now I hope that you're encouraged that it won't be some vain or naive effort on your part to start actually inviting people to do that, to come alongside you. Number two, a rhetorical question and a bit to cast vision. What would it look like if we had a church full of mature believers that were constantly encouraging people, follow me as I follow Christ? Because that's the dream of the church. That's the whole plan of this. This is an important teaching on discipleship and community. So now I leave the question with you. Who are you following and who's following you? Hey everyone, thank you again for watching this video. If this is your first time with me here on this channel, be sure to check out some of the other videos I have because they're starting to stack up. Hit the subscribe button down below, leave me a like, leave me a dislike, either one. And until the next time, I'll see you in the next video. Peace. What's the difference between a good joke and a bad joke? Oh, I messed it up. This is not social distancing, people. This is not social distancing. My favorite part about my Real Talks videos is when other people walk by and just think I'm talking to myself. And I just have to keep talking. You know, what else are you gonna do? Oh, no, sorry, with the camera. Talking to the camera. Me. It's okay. Oof. You see what I mean? Hi. How you doing?
Hey, how are you?
Doing good. Just talking to myself, you know.
Hey, I like it. Keep going.
Thanks. Don't get the Rona. I'll try not to.